Yes. I won't do anything to upset that. I am Michael J. Scott, and I'm an alcoholic. And I feel quite comfortable here because this is one of the first meetings I've ever attended that I don't want to call anyone out, that there's a lot of hearing impaired individuals here. And I am hearing impaired as well, and so I'm feeling right at home. I am a member of the Alcoholics Anonymous home group, the principals group in Raleigh. Am I speaking too loud? Yes. No? Okay, because I've been known to speak very, very loud to hear myself. And I am a member of the Alcoholics Anonymous group, the home group, principals group in Raleigh. We're a group that meets twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays are our closed meeting, and Thursdays are our open speaker meetings. And of course, when there's a fifth Tuesday or Thursday, depending on what's coming on, we have workshops and we study AA history. We study the traditions, we study the steps, and at some points or another, we discuss the concepts. We're a group that rely heavily on sponsorship, believing in home group, believing in service work. And that group, I'm not going to say is the best group of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's best for me. It gives me the opportunity to give back, not only to Alcoholics Anonymous, but to community. The birth of my sobriety is May the 15th of 2000. That's the year that everything changed for me. Now, there's a reason that I have this hat, and I made a promise that every speaker meeting that I was to speak at and to share, that I would put this hat on and I would pull it off. And the reason why is that this hat and this small plaque represents one of the greatest gifts I've ever received. And that's all due to the fact of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's due to the fact that a woman that participates in the Al-Anon program, her husband that had over 20 years of sobriety, and every engagement that he had, that was his hat, and that was the plaque that he put in his breast pocket. And how I came about that is I was working with her son. She had heard me speak, and he's still trying to get, as we say, the program. And as we know, it's not that we get the program, we surrender to the principles of the program. He's still trying to do that. But on one of my engagements, I call her once a week, and my mother has passed, and so she's the mother figure in my life. And one day, I went over, and she said, "Michael, I have a gift for you." Now, that's not necessary. And she always, all of our discussions over tea or coffee is about her husband. She was in love with him, a love that I had really never known. A love that you only hear in stories. And she said, "I have a gift." And it was my birthday. And she said, "Now, I didn't buy you anything." And she reaches in the bag and she starts to cry. And she pulls out this ratty looking hat. And as she's crying, she said, "I was talking to Jack." She always tells me she talks to Jack, and so I'm 80 years old, she can talk to anyone she wishes. But I'm there. And I'm still trying to go through his clothing after 5 years. And I said, and I looked up and I seen the hat. And she said, "Jack, what am I to do with it? This is one of the most prized possessions you had." And she said that Jack told her to give the hat to me. It was an endearing minute for me. It was a moment that I'd not arrived, but it was a moment that I will always cherish. Because my first instinct when she pulled that out was, I was going to get me a stick and beat this thing. I didn't know what it was. And I thought about taking it to the cleaners. I thought about having it refitted. I thought about a lot of things. But I decided to just leave it alone. And the second gift was the plaque of the Serenity Prayer. That is a gift from Alcoholics Anonymous. That is a gift. What I'm supposed to tell you in a general way is what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like today. There are specific points that I have to get specific about. And as Mr. Ivinster said, I will get drunk. And as I believe we all have got drunk. And I'm not going to stay drunk real long, because it was a treacherous journey getting to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was a journey of a lot of losses, a lot of failed dreams, and a lot of failed hopes. And I was that roaring tornado in the lives of many. And as a result of that, May 15th of 2000, when surrender, after 6 treatment centers, after 15 years of trying to get sober, after 30 years of alcohol use, abuse, and the submission to become the king alcohol's denizen, I surrendered. I didn't surrender because I was about to lose anything. You see, because things have been given to me before and I've gave them away. I do not remember my first drink. I do not remember that feeling of warmth and ease, what I decided I was going to drink. You see, my relationship with alcohol was a romance that slowly eroded certain areas of my life. It was a romance that offered me many great things and yet took away my ability to stick and stay. Alcohol, I understand today, allowed me to go to college to get the degree that it wanted me to have. Alcohol, I know today, allowed me to choose certain jobs in my life, certain relationships in my life. Alcohol today, I realize, dictated every waking moment of my life when I became involved. I grew up in a place right outside of Pittsburgh called Clairton, Pennsylvania. It's a small steel mill place. It's a place where you had 7 people on the law enforcement. You had 2 postal workers. You had 2 doctors, 3 pharmacists, and everybody else worked in the steel mill. So my greatest desire as a young man or a child was to grow up to go work in the steel mill, whose whistle sounded from 8, it sounded at 12, and it sounded at 4 o'clock. And there was a 10 o'clock whistle that allowed everyone to know that it was curfew times and that the kids needed to be home. So my objective was to go ahead and work in the steel mill, which I did. And when I got there, I knew I didn't want to be there. But you see, I went there because I was one of those individuals that I dipped and I dabbled with alcohol all the way through my life, simply because it was always available. It was a common thing. I'm not going to stand here today to tell you that I come from a dysfunctional family. I'm not going to tell you any of that. I'm going to tell you this. I had 2 loving parents. I had 5 siblings that I got around and I got along with for years and years and years. I had a wonderful childhood. A wonderful childhood. And there, I am sure, traits of alcoholism in my family. I know that there was a lot of people who did a lot of drinking, a lot of people got in a lot of trouble. And I am not one to say who is and who's not an alcoholic. I'm just saying, through my experience, Alcoholics Anonymous should have been a welcome type of thing in a lot of areas of my family. My drinking didn't start until I decided I got the bright idea that I was going to join the Navy. And I didn't join the Navy because of patriotic reasons. I didn't join the Navy because I loved the water. I joined the Navy to get out of the Pittsburgh steel mill. I didn't join the Navy for no other reason. So my motives of intent for serving my country were selfish. I didn't think about it that way. But when I joined the Navy, what happened? I got the freedom to be an adult. I got the license to go ahead and do what all military people were supposed to do. Have fun, play hard, drink hard, serve your country, do what's necessary. Now, the reason I joined the Navy is because if there was going to be any conflicts, I wanted to be way off somewhere. I didn't know it at the time, but I was a coward. But I wanted to be way off somewhere. But now, not only did I want to be way off somewhere, I wanted to be somewhere. So you see, like most alcoholics, and like alcohol itself, I was cunning. So I got an MOS that was a critical rating, working in surgery, whereas I could choose what I wanted to do. And working in a hospital environment, whether I was a civilian or in the military, it afforded me the opportunity to do what I wanted to do. Now, what I neglected to say is that right out of high school, I married real soon. Simply because, now I used to say that my wife got pregnant. Now in Alcoholics Anonymous, I assume the responsibility, my part. I got my girlfriend pregnant. And no one didn't tell me that it was the right thing to do to marry her. At that time, I was 17 and she was 16. Our parents consented. Right at the gate, I started to drink. Not hard, not heavy, but enough to cope with the fact of being a new parent. I didn't know anything about dealing with emotions. I didn't know anything about how to go ahead and to seek help. I didn't know. The only thing I knew is what John Wayne did. True grit. Just walk right through it. Live through it. When Clint Eastwood come on the scene, these became the leaders that I seen. So no one didn't tell me how to do this. I was a child raising a child. I was confused and didn't know I was confused. But I continued to drink. I continued to do things. Anyway, that child passed at the age of 2.5 months. I didn't understand at the time that I had an emotional breakdown because I didn't talk to anyone about it. What happened is that almost an entire year passed, and one day I woke up and I was in the Navy, and for years I never thought about that. I never thought that an entire year had passed. And how did I leave the steel mill and wind up in the Navy? I just woke up. That was it. That marriage ended. And I entered my second marriage almost immediately after. During this course of time, I had served in the service, and I had completed 4.5 active years and was in the reserves, and my drinking took on another form. Now that I was working in the civilian world, I was rubbing elbows, supposedly, with bigwigs. At least that's what I thought. And in doing that, I began to have some successes at what I did. I began to have requests that I come and I serve on different surgical teams because I, as a technician and as an assistant, I had the ability to go ahead and anticipate what the surgical needs was going to be. And that gave me the big head. Now, of course, I was carousing at night. Of course, what I was doing was drinking on a steady base. Of course, I was having that morning drink in order to stop my hands from shaking in surgery. Of course, I was still trying to go ahead and climb that social ladder. At one point in time, I was going to school full time. I was teaching part time. I was working full time. And I had a wife and 3 children. I went to 4 years of school in 3 years, graduated cum laude. And I can't tell you what those 3 years was all about. I do know this, that in those 3 years, I didn't carry a wristwatch or a pocket watch. What it was is I knew what direction to travel in because of the clothing that was laid out on the bed when I come through the door. I learned very soon not to make my wife mad. Because when I did, she would lay out clothing and I would go in one direction and I was supposed to be in the other. I used to say, I have been married 3 times. And the reason why I'm glazing over all of that is the fact that for years in my sobriety, I said that I was international. I had been married to a black woman. I had been married to an Asian woman. I had been married to a Caucasian woman. That's what I had said. But do you not know that in my 10th year of sobriety, I realized that my second wife was not Asian? I never knew. I never thought about it. It wasn't the fact that she was Asian. She had spent time in the Orient and had adopted her ways, and she was just as Caucasian as some of you in the room. But it took me 10 years of sobriety to remember that. I didn't know. Well, let's start at my last run. In 1989, I had left a position as working in surgery, a probation officer, a school teacher, an assistant counselor, working with physical therapists, to a job as a maintenance man. And the reason that I chose to become a maintenance man is because alcohol had debilitated me so bad, I couldn't concentrate, I couldn't focus. But you know, this alcoholic had a massive ego. And it says to me one day, you don't need to work for anyone else. Go ahead and start your own business. What it was actually saying is, look, if you actually see what's going on, you're going to seek some help. At that particular time, I had already entered 3 treatment centers. I had ended my second marriage. I'm that guy. And there's no pride in my voice. I'm that guy that had gone out to get a loaf of bread. And they hadn't seen me since 1986. That's where I was. In 89, my family found me in Orlando, homeless, and told me my grandmother had passed away. I hadn't been home in that time in 5 years. When they brought me home, my parents looked at me, and this is the words that they said. My mama said to me, son, your daddy and I are getting older, and you are the only one available to come home and help us to take care of the home. That's what my mother said. Now in my sober mind, I know what she meant. She said, boy, you're looking bad. Come here and stay here and let me take care of you. Within 6 months, my parents put me out of their house. I entered another treatment center. But you see, the most sobriety I ever got during all of this time was actually 6 months. Not living this program, having a sponsor and name, having a big book and the dust on his jacket, still thinking of ways that I could do something, still thinking of ways that I can make this work, still under the old impression that I had been taught all of my life that when a man makes a decision, he can do it. Just put your will into it. Put your back into it. Stay committed. I believe that. In 1990, after living 6 months homeless in my hometown, I knew that I was going to die an active alcoholism. I knew that there was no way back. I actually knew, and it was a non-alcoholic. My sponsor tells me, and I have heard him say, that Alcoholics Anonymous has many different friends in many different places. And a lot of time, that grace that gave us the opportunity to stay in the surrendered state presents individuals in our lives that are not alcoholic, but they carry a message of hope. And one of these was a mentor that I had for many, many years as a child. He looked at me one day while I was on the run again from the law. And he says, Michael, let me tell you something that's not a great lie, but it's a lie nonetheless. He said, have you ever heard that a bird in hand is better than two in the bush? And of course I've heard that. I said, yes. He said, well, sometimes it's true. He said, at other times it's not true, depending on the bird that you're holding. He said, son, I love you. He said, if you continue to hold that bird in your hand that you got, you're going to surely die. And he said, I couldn't take that. He said, however, sometimes a man, and he used that because he knew that I wasn't feeling like a man. I was feeling dejected. I was feeling hopeless. I was feeling helpless. I was feeling like a nobody. I was feeling like that stuff on the bottom of the ocean. And nothing that no one could say could bring me back. And out of all the years of my drinking career that I stayed away from home, I had a sense that I had at least one backup plan. I could always go home. But here I was at home. And I remember standing in an abandoned house and peering out the window, drinking reuniting wine, and my mother standing out in front of our house, looking around like she was just looking around. But I know what she was looking for. She was looking for me. But I was too ashamed to go out. But he said, sometimes a man must simply disappear. That's what he said. As I sat there in front of the little small space heater that he had, you see, because I had done some nefarious activity, the place that I had washed dishes for, I got drunk up and went back in there to finish washing dishes as they were counting up the money, putting it in the safe. Well, what was I supposed to do? I took the money. Didn't stick them up. Just walked past the counter with my apron on, hands still wet, water running in the sink, and out the door I went. Well, I'm sitting there, and the state police is looking for me, and this man is giving me this advisement. Sometimes you simply must disappear. Well, in July of 1990, right across the street from the steel mill that I used to work was a baking or a bakery. This is a place that I frequented as a child. This was a place that we used to go for sweets. But it was also a place that was owned by certain families that racketeered, that ran numbers, fencing operations, bettings, and things like that. We all knew about it. It was acceptable. But here's the ticket. When they closed the steel mill down, those steel mill rats that we used to train, that when the bell rang, they would come to the lunchroom. And the men that were there long enough, they had rats that would do tricks for treats. These same rats no longer had nothing to eat across the railroad track. So they would come across the track into town. Being that this operation was still running, a legitimate business, they needed to pass health code inspections. So the man, as a favor to my daddy, hired me in as a baker. But my job was to hunt these rats. 2 4-year degrees, probation officer, surgical tech, counselor, teacher, married man, a man with hopes. My job is to hunt rats. And I was good. And they were smart. I used to have to bait them and dust the floor, ingeniously dust the floor with flour so I could see their track line, because they wouldn't run along the wall. They avoided the regular traditional tracks. And he would pay me a bonus of $30 each rat. That's what my life had come to. I lived in a place called the Bat Cave, which was an abandoned motel that all the homeless people lived in, and when the sun went down, all the boards come off the windows. It was like Night of the Living Dead. But that's how I was living. And one day, while dusting for those rats, I couldn't take it anymore. And as I'm climbing behind the desk, what did I find? The checkbook. Well, nothing from nothing leaves nothing. Make a long story short, I wrote me some checks and I left. And that began a 10-year period of my life that was the beginning and the end. In those 10 years, I remained homeless. In those 10 years, I had 3 treatment centers. In those 10 years, I sold myself into slavery with migrant workers just so I could have a place to sleep, never getting paid. A place that I had to escape from and walk 40 miles to go to Raleigh. But it wasn't enough to stop me from drinking. In Raleigh, I met my third wife, an ideal mate, who condoned my drinking. And so we stayed homeless together for 10 years until she got tired. May 15th, the year 2000. That's in a general way. This is specific. May 15th, year 2000, I woke up in Raleigh. I didn't wake up, I come to. I was on the run again from the law for some serious charges. I was homeless again. I was without family again. By this time, my family up north hadn't heard from me in 10 years. I was desperate again. As I come to, I remember it was hot that May. I was living in the woods and only coming out to hit day labor places because the police were looking for me. And I heard. And I was in a little, what I call a hooch, which is like a partial type of tent because all the tent ain't there. But I had stolen it from some Hispanic people that lived in the woods, and I was sleeping on a pallet. And I remember when I come to, my eyes were glued shut. You know how you get in that drunken state and your eyes water and you wake up in the morning and you can't get your eyelids open? I hadn't bathed in weeks. And so what I actually did was I spit in my hand and started rubbing my eyes so that I could open them. And as I was rubbing my eyes, I was reaching with my left hand to find the bottle that I knew was there, because I was drinking it when I passed out. And it had tipped over. Fortunately, it had tipped over just enough that the pallet that I was sleeping on had caught it, so there was a slope in the bottom. And as I was bringing it to my eyes, I could feel the gnats on my hand and running in and out of the bottle. And when I got it close to my face, I could feel the gnats on me, but that wasn't enough. And I remember putting it up to my lips before I could get my eyes open and chugging a large swallow. And in that swallow, I had all these little hard bodies. So what I started doing was, between trying to filter through them and drinking and spitting them out, I come up with the bright idea. Why spit them out? Chew them up. It ain't nothing but protein. Who would do that? I would do that. And as I opened my eyes, I looked out and the sun was glaring. Oh man, it was muggy. And what was that smell? I'm looking around. And when I did like this, look, it was me. And I looked out into my little encampment. And there was a dog. They had been coming to my camp for about 2 weeks. It only had 3 legs. It never barked. It always stayed a distance. That was my companion. This is the moment that became clear. This is the moment that became my surrender. When I looked at that dog was sitting there where it normally sat at, a distance away from me. And this is what I heard. Are you going to feed me today? When that happened, something inside of me broke. And when it broke, I understood I can't do this anymore. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the greatest prayer that I've ever prayed. I can't do this anymore. And I broke down. May 15th, the year 2000. And when I got what I could of myself together, I didn't know what I was going to do. But I understood that I couldn't do what I've been doing. And I come out of that woods, and I don't have an idea of the time frame. But anyway, I flagged down the police officer. And I said, I believe you're looking for me. He said, I am. I said, yes, you are. He said, well, come on up here. What's your name? And I told him my name. He said, come on over here and have a seat, Mr. Scott. He set me in the front seat. Car door open, and he's on this side. He get it up on the computer. He said, yeah, you're right. We're looking for you. He said, now, I can't have you in the front seat. I said, I'm willing to go any seat you want. Because the seat that I had been in for close to 30 years, it needed changing. And they did everything they needed to do. For 1 year, I did not have any exposure to Alcoholics Anonymous while in the county. But you see, throughout the years, throughout programs, I had exposure to Alcoholics Anonymous that I understood that it's going to have to be a change in me. I understood that I could not, even though I didn't have the literature available, I understood that there were certain things I had to do, such as, number 1, physically not drink. Number 2, find this thing called the higher power. Number 3, start to have faith in something that was greater than me, because I couldn't. That's all I knew. And let me tell you something. I was angry. I was restless. I was discontent, but I didn't drink. Because drinking is available. You know what I'm saying? You can have a drink. It might cost you something. You can have a drink. But I knew I didn't want that way anymore. I understood, because of my exposure to alcoholism, that there was a solution. There was a way out. There was a way, maybe not to get back what I thought that I lost. You know what? I've been sober long enough now to know there's nothing that I had that I want back. When I got finally onto state time, this is where another miracle happened. The very things that I've practiced in that cell for a year, the very things that I was exposed when I contemplated and meditated and attempted to do right. When I opened up the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I seen exactly that God had met me where I was. He had given me a peace. Now let me tell you something. I don't know how many people have ever been in a state penitentiary or in a lockup for a period of time. But if there's any drinking to be done, it's time to do some drinking then. Because the only other option is to lose your mind. The only other option is to lose your spirit. The only other option is to be miserable. At least that's what I thought. But I'm here to tell you today that the power of this spiritual principles of Alcoholics Anonymous not only allow me to endure an environment that typically I wouldn't be drinking in, it allowed me to not just survive, but to thrive. When I say thrive, it allowed me to live a life of peace. It allowed me to experience freedom that I had never known before. It allowed me the experience to meet other members of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've heard some of those pseudo participants of Alcoholics Anonymous say is that, well, Alcoholics Anonymous is not the same in here as it is out there. Let me tell you what I do know. Alcoholics Anonymous is Alcoholics Anonymous. Either it is or it isn't. Spiritual principles are spiritual principles, applicable in what is the real world. And what is the real world? And I've had people inside tell me, the real world is what you are really experiencing. So this is the real world. Alcoholics Anonymous has brought me to a place to understand that my spiritual condition has a lot of input in what I practically do every day. I was able to walk through 8 years of the state penitentiary without a single write-up, not because I was a snitch. I was able to walk through 8 years in state penitentiary, not that there wasn't confrontations to be had with individuals, but with a stable sense of what was correct and what was not correct. Alcoholics Anonymous afforded me the opportunity to explore all options and understanding the fact that now I have been given the gift of choice again. Either I could choose to follow the herd. Now, the only way I follow the herd now is if they're going in my direction. Not blindly. Well, what happened? I was able to get through that. And when I was released, we all heard we're going to change people, places, and things. The first thing that they gave me was that we're going to give you conditions where you can live and where you not live. The first place they put me was back in the same homeless shelter that I was in 8 years before, living off and on. What was different with that was I was different. The homeless shelter was still the same. The second place they sanctioned that I could live was a rooming house that when I would get off of day labor, I would go tap on somebody else's window because I couldn't afford to stay there because I refused to pay rent. I had a thing. I ain't paying to stay nowhere. So I would tap on someone else's window. They would let me in. We'd drink up all my money and they would put me out because somebody else had some money. I lived in the very same room that they used to put me out in for close to 2 years. But I didn't drink. Alcoholics Anonymous has afforded me the opportunity for the first time in my 55 years of living. I've signed a lease and I pay rent in an apartment. And you know what the only reason I got candles for now? Is to meditate. Because I'm not at the place now that I can entertain ladies and have candlelight dinners. Okay? But my lights are on. Alcoholics Anonymous has afforded me the opportunity not to work in my career field, but to work every job from digging ditches to climbing trees and running from snakes and doing a good day's job. Right now I'm working at a recycling plant as a baling operator. The man said, "Do you know anything about metal?" I said, "No, sir. I just know it's not wood or stone." "You're hired." And they let me in. But they didn't let me in simply because I knocked. But I bothered them. They said, "Can't you read that sign?" I said, "Yes, I can." So what does it say? "We're not accepting application." But Alcoholics Anonymous let me know that it's a two-way street. "Oh, no, you're not accepting applications." "I am." Man said, "Give them an application to get out of here." That family. I was 4 years sober when I finally, after several times of working the fifth step, understood it's about time. And you know what happened? In the 14 years that I had been gone, that place that I grew up in, I forgot my address. Couldn't call it. There was nothing in the state about where I had been because I didn't give them no information. I don't know how I was able to do that. But I got distressed and I went to my sponsor. I went to the counselors that was around me. And I told them, "I'm ready to write home. But I don't remember my address." Alcoholics Anonymous walked me through the process of acceptance that I had become so deteriorated that I forgot my address. Alcoholics Anonymous stayed with me. When I say Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm talking about the faces of God. The faces of God being in the present with me. Because you see, I couldn't have been that spiritual. Do you not know for a month and a half I anguished over the fact that I could not remember my address? One night I went to sleep. And I had a dream. I'm not saying there was no burning bushes, and I'm not saying no waters parted. Only thing I'm telling you is my experience. And in this dream, I seen my street and the name, and I seen my house and the mailbox slot with the numbers over the top of it. And I got up the next morning, told my counselors, and I wrote, I didn't write a letter. What I did was my mom and dad's anniversary in January 14th. I went down to the chaplain and I picked up a little card, happy anniversary. And in this card, this is what I said. Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad, I'm alive. And I always, Michael J. Scott. And I mailed it. A week and a half later, the director called me to his office. He said, "Son, you might want to sit down. I talked to your sister." Well, no need to sit down. He said, "Sit down anyway," so I sat down. He said, "Your sister and I decided it would be best that I tell you So I'm cut right to the chase. Says, your mama's dead. Your cousin Gregory is dead. Your aunt is dead. Your mentor, teacher, the man that told me that sometimes a man has to simply disappear, is dead. I received all that news within a few minutes. And he said, now take some time off. The fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous surrounded me with love, compassion, understanding, support, all of the things that had eluded me all of my life, coming from men that were hardened, per se, criminals, that allowed me and taught me the grieving process. And for that, I am truly grateful. Today, in 5 months, I end a 5-year parole plan. For years that I served in the service of the state of North Carolina, they told me that I would have a 9-month post-release. The day that my parole officer picked me up in the car, and we were driving out of the parking lot, and I was cheesing just like a Kodak moment. And she looks at me. Mr. Scott, do you remember that 9-month post-release? And I says, I'm telling you, I could have done a Crest commercial. Yes, I do. She said, well, that has been changed to a 5-year parole plan. And with that same smile on my face, I just smiled because it froze. She said, do I need to turn this car around? And with that smile on my face, see, it was Grace that kept that fat smile on my face. I said, not unless you forgot something back there. You know, moments that are miracles. In a general way, I was able to go and get my recertification as a nursing assistant, licensed medication technician. I now volunteer for the crisis line, the Hope line of North Carolina. Took a 40-hour course. And I am now looking into a counseling certification, being that I have a 4-year degree. But I am still working as a belling operator at a recycling plant. I've purchased property right next to my dad's property for whenever I make my transition back up north. I'm in contact with my family who's left once or twice a week. I have built a relationship and have made the amends by living. Alcoholics Anonymous have taught me that the reality of living is this. I have made mistakes indeed. But in assuming responsibilities for all the activities of my life, I have made more wrong choices than mistakes because of ill intent. I was talking to an AA member prior to the meeting. I'm not held hostage by my past. I am accountable for my past. It is not over. When I say it's over when it's over. Now, I'm closing out. Time to get out of here. I've been known to talk, but I've also been trained on what and what not to do. Even though I got more to tell you, you won't hear it tonight. But our group closes with something that depicts my life. And this comes off of page 100. It says, both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstance. Michael J. Scott, and I'm out of here, and thank you, people.